There was a time when Pastor John Hagee seemed almost impossible to ignore. His sermons reached millions, his words carried influence far beyond the walls of his church, and supporters viewed him as one of the defining voices of modern evangelical Christianity. But today, the conversation surrounding him feels noticeably different. As the years have passed, public appearances have become less frequent, debates over his teachings continue to surface, and many people have begun asking the same quiet question: is this the closing chapter of one of America's most influential ministries? Honestly, the answer isn't nearly as dramatic as some headlines suggest, but it does reveal something far more human. Long before television audiences recognized his name, John Hagee was simply a young man who believed he had been called to ministry. Those close to his early journey describe someone driven by conviction rather than comfort, determined to share his understanding of Scripture no matter how challenging the path became. In many ways, his story reflected the journey of countless pastors who started with little more than faith and persistence. Yet few could have imagined that this quiet beginning would eventually grow into a ministry reaching audiences across the world. Everything changed as his preaching gained momentum. The founding and growth of Cornerstone Church in San Antonio transformed Hagee into one of the most recognizable evangelical leaders in America. Television broadcasts carried his sermons into millions of homes, while his books on biblical prophecy, Christian living, and faith found devoted readers around the globe. And that wasn't all. Through the founding of Christians United for Israel, his influence extended beyond the church into conversations about public policy and international affairs. Supporters admired his unwavering convictions, while critics questioned some of his theological interpretations and public statements. As his platform expanded, so did the scrutiny that came with it. But here's what most people never realized. The greater the influence, the greater the pressure. Every sermon, every interview, and nearly every public comment became the subject of discussion and debate. Reportedly, some of his statements over the years drew significant criticism from religious leaders, media commentators, and political observers alike. Yet despite the controversy, Hagee rarely stepped back from his beliefs. Many believe that consistency, whether admired or criticized, became one of the defining characteristics of his ministry. Then came the moments that quietly changed everything. As the years passed and age naturally slowed the pace of public life, many noticed that Hagee appeared less frequently than during the peak of his ministry. At the time, few understood what was really happening. Rather than chasing constant public attention, his focus appeared to shift toward mentoring future leaders, strengthening his church, and ensuring that the ministry he spent decades building could continue long after his own active leadership. It wasn't a sudden disappearance. It was a gradual transition that often accompanies decades of service. According to those familiar with long-standing ministries, this season can be one of the most difficult. Building something extraordinary is one challenge. Preparing to entrust it to the next generation is another entirely. Honestly, this quieter chapter rarely receives the same attention as the years of rapid growth. Cameras naturally focus on success, but they often overlook the emotional weight of legacy, aging, and responsibility. For someone who spent decades standing confidently behind the pulpit, stepping into a slower season requires a different kind of strength. Yet despite speculation, John Hagee continues to remain an influential figure for millions of Christians worldwide. His sermons are still watched, his books continue to reach new readers, and the organizations he helped establish remain active. While debates about his teachings persist, there is little doubt that his impact on modern evangelical ministry has been significant. Whether viewed as a passionate defender of biblical convictions or as a controversial public figure, his story continues to shape conversations about faith, leadership, and influence. Perhaps that's the real story behind the headlines. Things may not look the way they once did for Pastor John Hagee, but that isn't necessarily the same as saying things aren't looking well. Time changes every public figure. The spotlight eventually softens, the applause grows quieter, and influence begins to take a different form. In the end, a person's greatest legacy is rarely measured by how loudly they were celebrated, but by what continues long after the microphone is silent. If you found this documentary thought-provoking, we'd love to hear your perspective in the comments below. As always, please keep the conversation respectful. And if you enjoy thoughtful documentaries that explore the lives behind the headlines, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more untold stories. Because sometimes, the most revealing chapters of a life are written only after the spotlight begins to fade.